My book is entitled In Search of Respect, Selling Crack in El Barrio by Philippe Bourgeois. My name is Amelia Toll. My student number is 176264636 for the subject of Social and Cultural Perspectives on Public Health for the course of Master of Public Health at La Trobe University. These are my references. As the title suggests, this book is about selling crack in El Barrio, or Spanish Harlem, New York City. Bourgeois, the author, moved into East Harlem with his wife for 7 years, from 1985 to 1992, to befriend, observe, and document the lives and struggles of crack dealers, specifically Puerto Ricans, the dominating ethnicity. Not only did he aim to bring a sense of humanity and awareness to the extreme depravity faced by individuals working the streets, but he also discusses many of the cultural factors that play into their attitudes and needs, and how all of these barriers play into a larger issue of social marginalization in inner-city America. Bourgeois states in the book's preface that the most vulnerable inner-city residents are the children of children. In Chapter 5 of his book, Bourgeois recounts the many conversations he had with a few of the crack dealers he'd befriended about their experiences in growing up in school, and quickly discovers, much to his own horror, that rape, specifically gang rape, plays a hugely significant role in the male, and consequently female, experience of growing up in the street culture of East Harlem. For the males, it serves as a sort of rite of passage, gaining them respect and confirmation of their power and masculinity from their peers. Unfortunately, this often leads to the young teenage victims becoming pregnant, and although the child may bring a small bit of innocent joy to its mother, she is not mentally, financially, or socially ready for the responsibilities of a child, and the cycle of poverty, drug and sexual abuse, and societal powerlessness begins all over again. In his introduction, Bourgeois makes the point that it's not about crack, it's about their daily struggles for subsistence and dignity at the poverty line. None of them want to be working illegally. The problem is the lack of respect and dignity they feel they aren't receiving in the workplace. Whether it be the way they look, the way they talk, the way they dress, or simply the working-class, drug-prevalent neighborhood they grew up in, second and third generation New York-born Puerto Ricans are constantly dealing with discrimination, condescension, and an underlying prejudice from the surrounding cultures and the legal employment sector. Even Puerto Ricans born and raised on the island reject them, seeing them as wild, manipulative, and untrustworthy. They refer to them as gringos, a derogatory Spanish slang word used to refer to Caucasians or outsiders. In a blog review found on teenanthropologist.wordpress.com, the author comments that, whilst the book is honest, it does come with many dilemmas. The close friendships between Bourgeois and the drug dealers meant that at times he could not be objective and stand back as he saw some of his friends' lives spiral out of control. While I agree that this took place, I also sympathize with Bourgeois in these situations, where oftentimes, as much as we want to help one individual whom we see as struggling, in order to keep our work reliable and consistent for the good of improving the quality of life for the community as a whole, we must remain objective observers. However, we are still human, and our empathy for others and wanting to see others live well is part of what keeps us human. As ethnographers, there will likely always be debates on where we draw the line between staying objective for the good of the research and intervening in response to an immediate need for the good of an individual. In a 2010 interview about his work in East Harlem, Bourgeois refers to the word culture as a black box, a way to stereotype individuals of a certain race by calling it something else, but not being a useful way to understand why things happen. He describes how risk environment is a much better concept to use because culture of poverty just looks at self-destructive outcomes instead of the structural forces that poor people face every day. An issue that's brought up by Bourgeois in his conclusion is the issue of what kind of liberation, emancipation, or autonomy is being carved out by women in El Barrio's streets. It raises a complicated question within larger feminist debates over who defines the meaning of women's rights and what do women's rights mean in the context of class and racial oppression. In Chapter 6, Redrawing the Gender Line, Bourgeois shares the story of Candy, a single mother of 5 whose husband Felix is in prison. Candy describes growing up with an abusive father, causing her to run off with Felix at age 13 in the hope of finding love and stability, only to end up with her first child at 14 and an abusive husband whose beatings caused 5 miscarriages in the 20 years they'd been together. Candy described how she came to think that physical abuse was how men showed their love for their women, and when her oldest daughter was gang raped at 12, instead of taking out her anger at those responsible, Candy sought out the mother of another girl who was also raped with her daughter, as though it was her fault that Candy's daughter was raped, and not the men's. When Candy did finally break away from her husband's abuse, instead of redefining the patriarchal parameters, she simply began to take on the patriarchal role herself, by taking pride in making money as a street dealer, having a kept lover, bragging about her sexual prowess in public, requiring her lover to have sex with her upon demand, and so on. Instead of giving her children a strong image of self-respect and resilience and showing her children that her struggles were there to teach her children what not to become, she became the very embodiment of the men who had for so long oppressed her, further perpetuating the negative influence of the streets. On Goodreads.com, one reviewer brings up one of the questions that I'm sure most readers, including myself, ponder. And that is, where do we draw the line between personal responsibility and structural responsibility? We tend to try to distinguish the worthy poor from the unworthy poor. Who deserves our help and who doesn't? Who needs it more than the others? Until we can reconcile those feelings and attitudes as a society, we can't truly make positive change or reach any sort of equality.